The Bulldogs got their big three.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gephardt. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And of course, our Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Carson Beck is trending for a Cavender, and UGA is still winning the recruiting battle. But first, Jarvis, Georgia announced that Carson Beck, Malachi Starks, and our guy Mykel Williams will attend SEC Media Days next week. So first, are these the three most important players for Georgia to make another run at the Natty? Is that what that's indicating with them being at the podium?
I think so, because I think Carson Beck is probably the most important player in the country, to be honest with you, because when you think about what he brings to the table, and having that experience and potentially being a Heisman candidate, and we know what that looks like when it comes to the Georgia Bulldogs, right? Because when the last time we seen a quarterback, even being in that conversation, when you talk about Stetson Bennett, he got invited, but nobody really thought he was going to win. So you potentially talking about a guy that can get in the starting the season in the conversation, and then all he got to do is just go out there and just play like one, and more than likely he's going to be the favorite to win.
Yeah. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, and Carson Beck too, like you mentioned, there's a lot of hype with him right now, a lot of conversation. This is the most hype as far as a prospect for the NFL goes since Stafford. It went along a little differently in the sense of when Stafford was on campus immediately, it was like, all right, 3 years from now, he's going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. And that's actually what wound up happening with that. And Beck's kind of worked his way up there, but him and Starks and Mykel Williams, all three of these guys have a good chance to be top 10 picks. And you're looking at probably with Beck and Mykel Williams, good chance of being top 5 picks. Starks, maybe because he's a safety, he's outside of that top 10, but that's a really nice way. There's a million different ways that Georgia can show the talent that they're able to bring in and everything, but to represent in Dallas like that for the first time that it's there, and to bring, all right, we're going to bring potentially the number one quarterback taken, potentially the number one defensive line taken, and potentially the safety as well. So I think it's going to be a nice showing there from Georgia. Bringing those three studs out there to Dallas, I think will be a good time for them.
Now, Jarvis, looking at that, thinking of Beck, Starks, Williams as the most important pieces of this Georgia team, and making that statement, sort of having them hit the podium in Dallas next week, if those are the three most important players, who would be kind of next in your ranking of most important players for the Dogs?
I would. Two names came to mind, right? I know you said one, but you know me. Sometimes I got to kind of take a little different route, right? I feel like the first name that came to mind was Trevor Etienne. The second name is Dominic Lovett. Reason why I said those guys is because we understand what Georgia wants to do. Even though we know that they have the wide receivers. I feel they have the wide receivers to be able to get the job done and be able to throw the ball around a little bit. But Kirby Smart, to his core, defensive coaches love to run the football. I don't care. You can talk about guys that are, especially when they're head coaches, right? But so I think there's going to be a time period where they're going to have to be able to establish themselves in that run game and continue to be the guys that they want to be, because we understand that offensive line, and we're going to talk about some of the recruits that Kirby has pulled in a little bit later on, but they have an excellent offensive line right now today. So I feel like they want to be able to take advantage of that. And then I feel the rapport that Carson Beck has gotten with Dominic Lovett, and I feel like, Dominic Lovett was a very productive wide receiver when he transferred from Mizzou, and his numbers kind of went down for obvious reasons, right? So, but I think that, Dominic Lovett probably potentially could be a guy that can be 1,000-yard receiver. And we know we haven't seen that in quite some time.
Yeah. And the other thing, we haven't seen it in quite some time. That's that one wrinkle of this offense over
Terrence
the
Edwards, I
years.
believe, right? I think that was the last
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
and it's one of those things in the offense over the years where it's like, all right, that's the one thing you're still waiting to pop, right? Is to have that elite top end wide receiver like they get at Bama and like they get at Ohio State and all of that. I took this question a little bit into a different direction in terms of Jared Wilson and CJ Allen, the signal callers on offense and defense, and younger guys stepping into those bigger roles. I think if the defense needs to be where it's going to be, CJ Allen is going to have to really grow up fast and quick. And Jared Wilson's taken over for Cedric Van Pran, who is, longtime starter there for Georgia and just a stalwart. It's so easy when you have that communication between center and quarterback.
So, Jarvis, we talked about the fact that obviously with Beck, with Starks, with Williams at the podium, those are your three most important players. You guys talked about some of your three next most important players, but which of these three are then best at their particular position?
Well, I think obviously Carson Beck for sure. He's the best at the particular position. So I won't go there.
Right.
I feel like, when you think about we're gonna have here's my Mykel moment, right? So when you think about Mykel Williams, I think when I talked about Carson Beck being probably the most important player position, in the country, as far as getting Georgia back into the playoffs and being the catalyst for this team to get another national championship, I feel like Mykel Williams is important, not necessarily in the country, but as far as his team, because we know the potential is there. We know what he brings to the table from an athletic standpoint and being able to float between being an outside edge guy and a defensive end slash, and lining up over the guard. He can kind of move around a little bit on up and down the defensive line. So I feel like Mykel Williams is the guy that I know he is the best player, but I feel like it's time for him to show it. And if he shows it and Carson Beck shows it, we're going to be talking about this team late January, on into well into the end of the season, and then potentially Kirby Smart raising another trophy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Beck, it's one of those, even if he doesn't improve, right, and he plays like he did last year, Georgia's probably going to be right there again. Maybe they get one or two losses, but they're going to be in the playoffs again. I think with Mykel Williams, to Jarvis's point, if he goes from being good like he's been to taking that next level and maybe getting up there towards that double-digit sack mark for the year and wreaking havoc in that way, I think that's what makes this team being really, really, really good like they were last year to being great again and to getting to that next level of like, okay, this team's a problem. And I say all of that to answer the question of, I think Malachi Starks is the best player at his position in particular. It's one of those things, we don't value safeties in the same way that we value quarterbacks or people that get after the quarterback, nor should we. But to me, he's the best safety in the country, and his ability to force turnovers and to make plays in that secondary is second to none around the country. So, and the other thing too is this is his defense. Like he's the leader of this defense. I mean, Mykel Williams might be potentially the best player and might wind up being overall most important and could potentially go higher in the NFL draft. But Starks is going to lead this thing, and what he's done up to this point, I think, has shown that he's the best at what he does.
Yeah, and I think low key, he might be the sneaky most important player on the team, because when we talk about the Georgia Bulldogs going up against Texas, going up against Alabama, what kind of challenges they had last season against Jalen Milroe and this season facing a Quinn Ewers. So yeah, I think that sometimes we overlook the importance of the secondary and the fact that Malachi Starks may be low-key just the most important player, maybe that we don't talk about enough for this Georgia Bulldogs team. Now, speaking of the secondary and speaking of protecting the quarterback, there are some very interesting and exciting recruits that Georgia was able to snag. We know that they started off in June with so much fire. Now they're starting off July that way once again. We'll talk about it when we go between the hedges. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to game time, with killer last minute deals, all in prices views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. So think about this. The Braves are finally starting to trend up. Of course, they are on a trip right now. They're on their last road trip of the season before MLB All-Star. But when they come back, they might be bigger, badder, and better than ever. So you want to get those tickets so that you can see the Braves potentially go on a back-end surge for the season. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports. But concerts, comedy, and theater as well with Game Time. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. So here's the way you do it. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off your first purchase. Again, that's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Now, terms do apply, but create that account, redeem the code, and download the Game Time app, because the Game Time app is the way that you can get last-minute tickets with lowest prices that are guaranteed. So, guys, last week we talked about the Dogs being major winners as far as the recruitment battle in June. We wondered, will they bring that momentum into July or won't they? Well, apparently fireworks happened once again on the 4th of July weekend for this Dogs team. Shamari Earls, who we talked about last week, the possibility of him flipping from South Carolina to Georgia. Well, BG, it actually happened on Sunday. Earls announced that he indeed flipped, and it's perfect timing because we also talked about how we don't talk a lot about the secondary and how important they are to this Dogs team. This is, of course, for the class of 2025, but how big is this flip for Kirby Smart?
This is cold-blooded from Kirby right here. South Carolina, this is their number one overall player in the class of 2025. Like, this is the guy they had. This is like the prize of their recruiting class. And this is kind of just another defensive player for Kirby in that group of 2025. What's really big about this is first DB in this group. First cornerback specifically in this class and in this group, because they've been getting these defensive guys left and right. I know we're going to talk about one or two more of them here in just a minute, but being able to take it from a division rival, even though the divisions are gone and they're not playing South Carolina, it's still a rivalry a little bit in my heart. At least that's the way that I view it, so for them to able to get Earls and to add an actual cornerback in this class is big. And then, a lot of these recruits we talked about the last handful of weeks have been in-state. This is a nice out-of-state recruit for Georgia. So they're starting to continue to get out nationally, because I think Earls is out of Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. So good get for Kirby. Good job flipping him.
And Jarvis, I talked about this on my radio show a couple of days ago. We were talking about rivalries and whether or not they're important. And I think BG made a very good point. With the divisions going away in the SEC, the rivalries may kind of reset themselves, but there are certain things that you do and certain teams that you play, certain programs, that there's always going to be sort of a rivalry or some type of enmity. And that's South Carolina, because Shane Beamer is probably fighting for his head coaching life. And when you flip a guy like this is huge, especially because I think South Carolina is going to be one of those teams that, because of them handing Georgia a loss in Athens, I don't think they're ever going to forget about that. I think that's always going to be some type of source of motivation for Georgia. But yeah, it's one of those where now that there's not a division, it's technically not the same kind of rival. But when you do this, it kind of ratchets up that rivalry again.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because here's the thing. They don't have to play each other to have a rivalry. Like, you talking about recruiting wars, that is, that is going to go on to the end of time. Because when you think about, just from a location standpoint, that's what made those rivalries so great. Because these guys, these coaches going out, and Kirby included, and Shane Beamer as well, they recruiting some of the same guys. Yeah. Because they know where to go. There's certain areas that they know to go to. That's why Kirby always talked about how, hey, I want to be able to hold down the state first. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you think about, all the talent that's coming out of the state of Georgia, going to California and getting a guy like Brock Bowers, like, that stuff matters. Like, so when you talking about these 4-star, 5-star guys, like, some of the same coaches are coming into these guys' homes saying, hey, man, come down here and play with us. So for Kirby to go on up the road a little bit in South Carolina to go, up to Virginia and go get a guy like Earls, a lot of people, a lot of SEC teams were taking a look at and trying to get to their squad. For him to go up there, it's a huge win. And I think that's when you think about, they're not necessarily competing against each other in pads, but the competition is real when it comes to recruiting nowadays, especially when you got the whole NIL piece and just guys just moving around each and every year like it's 1 year. Everybody signing 1 year contracts and they're getting up out of there. So that's what feeds rivalries. Because those message boards go, like it's Georgia fans out here talking trash to all the little South Carolina Gamecock fans, and probably some little dirty jokes flying around too. So, this is what we know. This is what we know.
Notice how Jarvis said it. The little South Carolina Gamecock fans.
He said it. I didn't say it. He said it.
That's how Georgia fans feel, though. If we're being honest about it, the little South Carolina Gamecock fans. But shout out to Tavares Robinson and his group, because I tell you, the recruiting machine that Georgia is now, like you said, going past that defensive front and what they do on the offensive side of the ball, now they're starting to snag them on in the secondary. And not to be outdone, the 4-star safety, Jalen Morgan, out of Rockville High School in Rockville, Tennessee, which still, that's winning the South for all intents and purposes. He confirmed that he chose Georgia over Florida, over Ole Miss, over Mississippi State PG. So how do the Dogs go from no DB commits in the class of 25 now to having an embarrassment of riches?
Yeah, it's nice, right? Well, part of it's like, okay, we got this spot open for you, right? Like, you can come in. There's no one in this class. Like, this thing is open, even though you're going to come in and compete. Nothing's given. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. But he's going to be a nice piece because he's going to come in. He's going to be that nickel, that star. At least that's where Kirby had told him. That's where he's envisioning him into that next role, which has become even more important too once you get into the league as well. So this is just exactly right. Money Star. I like it. It's got the best nickname too. That Star Money. Like people know what it is. Like so the fact that he was able to get him, and it's just that, you've gotten like the number 1 edge, you're getting the number 1 linebacker, and now you're adding, these are like it's like crazy that this is like a secondary group, right? Oh, here's a 4-star safety, and here's a 4-star cornerback, but another nice addition who's going to fit into this defense. Great. And another out-of-state recruit too for this group. So
yeah.
This is huge because, like, just looking at Morgan's kind of film and everything, I was just like, man, these dudes all look the same. They're a carbon copy of each other. 6 feet, 180 pounds, play both ways. So he has some athletic ability, right? To be able to, he played a little wide receiver and he played a little cornerback. Sounds familiar, So it's just, we talk about the same thing with Shamari Earls. Those are some of the things that we have to understand. Like, when it comes to team building, Kirby understands exactly what he wants. I was having a conversation last night. People talking about an archaeologist, right? Like, they go in these big widespread lands to go find fossils, right? Like how do they do that? They know what they're looking for. And Kirby, when he goes out into, Tennessee and Virginia and Florida and California, he knows exactly what he's looking for. He knows exactly the type of player that he wants, and he's identified that. So that's why he's so good at recruiting, because he knows exactly what he wants. He's not just going after 4 or 5 stars. Sure enough, those guys end up being 4 or 5 stars, but he knows the type of player that he wants. He knows that those guys can come in and just fall in line and just going on into the assembly line and going on to the NFL.
Speaking of knowing exactly what you want, apparently his number 1 QB knows exactly what he wants on the field and off. We'll talk about that when we come back in What's Next.
Oh, that's an excellent tease. I gotta say it.
You gotta love us here. You gotta absolutely love us, because we made you come back, didn't we? Because you want to know just as much as we want to talk about it. So Locked On Sports Today is, of course, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the noise, although we do bring you a little bit of drama. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, guys, let's think about this. This year, Carson Beck has been the conversation topic in the Heisman Trophy race, right? He's one of the favorites. But he's also been a topic of conversation because of the kind of car he was driving. Everybody was all up in arms about Carson Beck driving a Lambo. But BG, apparently he has outdone himself with why he is trending this time. Because this time he's trending because of who he maybe is taking in that Lambo from point A to point B. And that is one Hannah Cavender. In case you guys don't know, I don't know how you wouldn't because you must have been under a rock. But the Cavender twins are like NIL darlings. They have kind of moved around from point A to point B. But I know I kind of checked in with them when they were with UNLV, right? Superstars, students, athletes, and of course, like I said, NIL and social media stars. That apparently is who Carson Beck is dating. But real talk, some people are not pleased about this because they're wondering where his focus is. So for you, BG, for you, JG, are you concerned? Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing for Beck and the Bulldogs?
I got to admit, selfishly, my initial reaction was, oh, man, this is trouble. This is bad. This is bad news. This is bad news, man. This is tough because it's just like, all right, we're here. So a couple of years ago, we're looking at NIL stuff, and now it's just all out in front of it. It's like, all right, now Beck's been the starter for 1 year, and like you mentioned, now it's like Lambo, Cavender twin, we're doing the whole thing, and good for him. I mean, have fun. Do your thing, but not gonna lie, I'm hoping this is a summer fling. I'm kind of hoping we wrap this thing up like late August. I don't know what school. I don't know what school the Cavender twins. I mean, they're going to Miami most recently. I don't know if they got any eligibility left. I don't know if they're hooping overseas. I don't know what's going on because, I'd almost like it more if it was like a Livy Dunn, Paul Skeens kind of thing where they were both in the same school. The whole travel, going to and fro. What are we doing in between games? In all seriousness, though, I hope he's having fun. I hope it's good. It is one of those things where you're just kind of like, all right, just if it ends, just have it end okay, nothing weird, And it's funny that he's here already, that he's become this superstar in this situation. But I wouldn't mind if this wraps up by the end of August. One thing that's going to be really interesting about this is the fact that SEC Media Days is next week. People ask all sorts of weird questions. This is going to be a topic. Like, this is going to be a story next week.
Yeah.
And they need stories kind of like this at Media Days to move it along and have some fun. So it's not just straight X's and O's.
Right. Well, if you know this show, we're here for the petty. So we'll be sure to download with you if we can, because usually Georgia's like late in the media day kind of pecking order. They're usually Wednesday, Thursday. But if anything comes out before then, we'll tell you about it.
Yeah, for sure. So many things. So it was Fresno State. I thought it was UNLV when we were talking about it, but I think they were at Fresno State. I missed those.
Yeah, they were at Fresno State, but they were also at UNLV. I didn't pay no offense to them, but I didn't pay attention to them when they were at Fresno State. Sorry.
Yeah.
I picked up on them when they were in Vegas. Yeah, that's when I jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this situation is very interesting. Now, BG, let me go ahead and tell you. I know I love you, man, but that man ain't stopping this before August. Like, we just
you don't think?
No. See, when you're in college, from 18 to 22 years old, as a man, been a college athlete myself, and I'm nowhere near the level of these people, the stardom they have achieved. Because right now, Carson Beck is internet famous. So when you think about getting with one of the Cavender twins, it's
good for business.
It's very good for business, but it's also good for self. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm just right there.
Okay, I rarely disagree in these instances, and you guys know I never ever interrupt you in your train of thought. But I gotta disagree with you on this one, Jarvis. First of all, I would BG go on and get this done before September 4th.
Yeah,
I think that's the day that's your opening day. So go on and have fun with that. But tap out.
But what if he likes it?
No.
We need
you to focus. No. We need you to focus. No, unless you're gonna be like, oh gosh, remember the Alabama quarterback whose girlfriend was in the stands and Brent Musburger was making
I
all
know
of
you're
the
talking about.
commentary.
He was lusting over in the game.
Yes,
Oh
yes.
yeah, I know you're talking
Now,
about.
that
Oh
situation
yeah, AJ McCarron.
AJ McCarron's a girl. Yeah.
So AJ McCarron's situation might be different because I think his girlfriend was at Alabama. It's just like you said, BG. Like if she was like a Libby Dunn-Paulsky situation where they're at the same school, that's a little bit different. I'm telling you from experience, long distance ain't no joke. All right. So her, like, unless they're gonna like make their way to Athens, the Cavender twins, and somehow transfer to UGA, like I'm not here for it because it's just too complicated. And we need Carson Beck focused because hey, we want to be talking about a national championship on the Atlanta football party at the end of the season. That's number one. And number two, okay, I'm not gonna out Jarvis completely, but let me tell you all something. If he's acting like it's just one fish in the pond that Carson Beck should or is focusing on, miss us with that because that isn't even realistic. If he's not just internet famous, but he's a Heisman hopeful candidate, he might be running up to another natty. Are you kidding me? Like he can get any girl he wants, anytime he wants, and he can tap out and tap in whenever he wants. So can you tap out on September 4th and tap back in around mid-January? Like, hey, do that. Unless you expect her to be Mrs. Carson Beck. Okay, if she's Mrs. Carson Beck, that's different. But if she ain't Mrs. Carson Beck, tap out, man, because we need championships around here. Okay,
man, that man is about to be tapping in. You understand me? Like,
nope.
Come on.
Nope. Nope.
Like T.
Nope. He can have all the fun he wants to after the fact, or and let's just face it, he's a college kid anyway. Next week we could be having a conversation about the unbelievable breakup of Carson and one of the Cavender twins.
But this thing is just getting started. Like she might have motives too. You know what I'm saying? Like
although they could, right, or they
number one overall pick.
Yeah, that
man is a catch.
It could be good for business. Yeah,
she might be. You know what I'm saying? It might be good for her too.
Oh, it is. I'm sure we're having a conversation about her. Yeah. When have we had a conversation about a Cavender twin on this show?
Yeah. No, and this is good for both of them in the sense of we're talking strictly business and NIL and all that type of thing. Because these girls, like I think she's got like 800,000 followers on Instagram. This isn't like just little account.
Deals out the wazoo. Yeah,
they made this a big deal, but yeah, Teets, it's like here's the thing. Yeah, either stay together, run this thing through January. We can't be talking about the Carson Beck breakup on the bye week, before Alabama game, we can't have this happen. We can't go down September 20th, right?
Yeah, because then the Alabama fans,
it's not good for morale. It's not good for anything.
December, the Alabama fans go and make the Hannah Cavender faces and have them in the stands in Tuscaloosa. What? I'm not doing that.
So we need one or the other. We either need them to go ahead and break up by like mid-August. We need that, or just go ahead and both of the Cavender twins come on down to Athens. Let's transfer. I'm sure there's a couple years of eligibility somewhere. Come on down. Stay in Athens, and we'll ride this thing out for a year before everybody goes to the draft and gets paid and everything else.
Oh man, look. Like I wish I would tell a 19-year-old Jarvis that probably got one of the baddest women in the entire country. Everybody knows her. Everybody sees her. Oh yeah, just date her for like 45 days. You know what I'm saying? And then get back to your business. Man.
Well, on this note, we'll end on this note. All I was saying is it's easy because 19-year-old Jarvis was just like 19-year-old Carson Beck with the attention span that was about this big. So how difficult it is to tap out in 2 months. Anyway, thank you guys for us allowing us to go way off the rails with this Atlanta football party. But we're free and available wherever you download your podcast. You know how to find us on our YouTube channel where you should like and subscribe. And you can check us out where we may be a little bit more serious on Thursday on the Atlanta Sports Party.